What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Wednesday, November 2nd, 2016, hump day, middle of the weekday, starting that long, slow glide down to Kaahumanu Friday, and an absolutely insane pre-election weekend. It is not going to let up. If anything, it's going to be getting more and more and more intense. The hacker attacks on my server are escalating. They're trying new tactics. It's insane out there. There's a flood of total nonsense being poured onto the web trying to keep everybody confused. They're trying to replay the stained blue dress distraction. Hillary is trying to keep people from paying attention to what's coming out of WikiLeaks and the new resuscitated email investigation by dangling Jeff Epstein's orgy island at people. And so they're going to be doing all of that. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, and ready to answer the phones when you call on in. Now, needless to say, following last Friday's announcement that the email investigation was being reopened on the basis of these 650,000 emails found on Huma Abedin Anthony Weiner's laptop, the Hillary campaign claims they've already looked at all of this stuff, and there's nothing to see here. But Judicial Watch is confirming that on that laptop what was classified information. They don't know how much yet, but they've already identified some of it. And it's not supposed to be there. It's a crime just having those files on that unsecured machine. So this is really cranking up. On the basis of this new revelation, Speaker of the House Paul Ryan is again saying that it's time to stop the classified briefings of Hillary Clinton because she cannot be trusted with classified information. And according to the latest poll numbers, she's not likely to be the president no matter how much she tries to steal it. We don't want a very angry, annoyed, frustrated Hillary Clinton running around the globe getting $1 million a speech in possession of classified information. Story coming out of WorldNet Daily, biggest scandal in U.S. history about to break. And what they've discovered, this is actually coming out of Judicial Watch again. They're looking at these emails, and they're discovering that Huma Abedin, while she was at the State Department, was emailing copies of this material to her yahoo.com email address. That's a tacky no-no. This appears to be the pipeline by which copies of all these documents migrated onto that laptop into her life insurance directory. So that is getting very, very intense. And again, it's all illegal. It's all Title 18 violations. And clearly there was intent. All right, let's take a couple of quick phone calls. Bob in Las Vegas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. First, on a lighter note, I'm still laughing from that comment you made yesterday about your home decor being early Salvation Army. That was great. I know you've been a magician before, but have you ever worked as a comedian?
I actually did. I tried stand-up for a little while, and I actually shared a stage with Billy Crystal at the Ice House in Pasadena. But I had a lot more fun as a magician, so I didn't stick with it. But, you know, I used to do screenwriting, and I wrote comedies and everything, and I had a couple of things optioned. Then I got ripped off by a producer at Columbia, and I kind of just said, all right, I don't want to deal with that stuff anymore, and I went on to do other things.
Wow, okay. First, do we know Huma Abedin's present location, where she is, if she hasn't skedaddled to Saudi Arabia or somewhere else?
I certainly am not privy to her current location any more than I am Brian Pagliano. The word we have is that Huma is talking with the FBI, that her lawyers are negotiating an immunity deal. Anthony Weiner is fully cooperating, which is why they were able to just go in, find these emails, and despite Loretta Lynch, they didn't need a warrant to look at them because Anthony said, here, whatever's on the machine, go ahead, help yourself.
Right. And then lastly, Mike, just to change the subject, have you heard the latest news about the North Dakota pipeline, how Obama's, I don't know, he broached the possibility of it being, the route being moved, being changed rather?
Well, I think that would be a smart thing to do. It's gone global. People are looking at this as another classic case of life under fascism here in the United States of America. It would be an easy thing to do. And, of course, complicating it is that we've had yet another gas pipeline explosion that resulted in damage. And it simply underscores the fact that, yes, these pipelines are dangerous, especially since this pipeline company did not, according to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, have all the necessary paperwork to be putting a pipeline where they wanted to. And I think that would be the obvious solution. Reroute the pipeline someplace where it's not going to be affecting people. Because the protesters over the pipeline, it's not just the fact that these lands are important to them. The Native Americans take their religiously important lands very important. Most of them are burial grounds. Okay, how would you feel about an oil pipeline going through your local church's cemetery? So, but it's also, the potential for contamination of their fresh water, and that's something that's been going on a long time. There's a wonderful Val Kilmer movie called Thunderheart, and I think it's one of his best movies. And most people don't know about it. They think of Val Kilmer, and they think about Real Genius and Top Gun and the rest of it. But Val Kilmer did this movie, Thunderheart, which was loosely based on real events that took place on an Indian reservation, where there was a uranium mining company that was there under dubious legality, contaminating the drinking water supply with the runoff from the mining operation, just making people sick. And so these things unfortunately do happen out on these reservations, and these people are right to stand up and defend their lands and say, look, fine, you want a pipeline, take it somewhere else.
No, I agree. I applaud those people and those who've come from outside the area to protest. I think, though, Obama's announcement was only made after I've heard that there was a use of rubber bullets. So maybe these police are also being trained by the IDF.
Well, the IDF doesn't train people to use rubber bullets. The big puffy ones. They have what they call rubber-coated ammunition, which is still lethal at short range. But a lot of people have shown up to support them. Susan Sarandon was up there. We had a delegation from one of the sovereignty groups here in Hawaii went on over to support them. Margot Kidder, you remember her as Lois Lane from an earlier Superman? She was up there supporting all these people. And the right of the people to determine their own future. We're going to take a second here to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. We're talking about politics. We're talking about the pipeline protests. And as soon as we're done with that, we're going to be getting back to all the corruption that's coming out of Washington, D.C., because that's where you need to keep your attention right now until Election Day is just this sheer tsunami of corruption and crime that is being revealed through all of these various leaks. WikiLeaks, Anonymous, DNC emails. Other people are just coming forward anonymously and dumping data onto the net. It's a huge... Basically, it's a coup within the government. There are just enough people inside the government who realize that if Hillary is allowed to steal the election and continue things as they are, the entire government will collapse and they'll all be out of work. So that's why we're seeing literally a faction fight within the U.S. government right now. Okay?
Thanks for playing that quote from Good Will Hunting yesterday. It was great.
It was, and I found the video of it and I posted it to WhatReallyHappened.com. So if you want to scroll on down, to one, like yesterday's page or something, you can see it again. It is a very, very good quote, and it really sums up the reality of what U.S. foreign policy has been.
Does. Thank you so much.
All right,
Mike.
Thanks. We're going to switch over to Steve in California. Steve, what's on your mind?
Yeah, Steve?
Aren't you Steve? Aren't you Steve?
Yeah, I didn't hear that last part there. Yeah. Question, after Donald Trump's rally in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, they had a couple other speakers come after him, some physicians. They talked about Obamacare. In certain states, they were talking about a 46% increase, other states much higher. My question was, I'm just kind of confused of why there's a variance of percentage increases. I thought it would be pretty much all the same. So how is that working?
Well, it has to do with the fact that some of the states are operating Obamacare-affiliated exchanges, and they're in varying degrees of economic difficulty. So the increases are basically to cover the losses that they've been sustaining because people are not lining up to buy those Obamacare policies. They're opting to basically pay cash for their medical care and accept the IRS penalty, which is going to get really, really nasty. Because the way the government works is when they come up with a boneheaded, dumb idea, they'll simply tax you until you go along with it so that they can declare it a success.
Right. Yeah, I was kind of surprised. He said, I forget what state he said it, but 46% for his state, and some states were higher, much 75% higher. And I thought, wow, I kind of thought they'd all be in the same program. You'd have the same percentage in all states.
See, it's not exactly the same program in every state with those state exchanges, half of which have already gone out of business. Plus, you're dealing with the degree of health care needed in the individual states, which varies depending upon quality of living. Out in the rural areas, the costs to the insurance companies aren't as high as they are in the inner cities, and certainly in Flint, Michigan, for example, where there's a lot of illness because of that tap water problem.
Well, it's definitely a program that should be scrapped. It definitely has to be scrapped.
It may collapse before Trump can even get into office, from what I'm hearing right now.
That's true. Hey, thanks, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Here, we're going to close the phone lines for a little bit and get back to some of the news. Senator Tom Cotton is out there basically saying the Clinton Foundation is the largest money laundering operation in the world. This according to a story out of dailycaller.com. And basically on Hugh Hewitt's radio show was saying that this new revived email investigation is going to move forward very quickly, pointing out the same thing that I pointed out earlier on the show. When Hillary Clinton first surrendered copies of her emails to Congress, they were all printed on paper so that people had to sit and read and read and read. It was done deliberately to prevent machine searching. Now they have all the emails searchable on computer, and with modern searching techniques, they're going to get through the 650,000 emails very, very quickly. Given that these appear to be backup dumps of the server, there's probably a lot of duplicates in there, but they're going to be able to search by keyword and find a lot of stuff, and stuff is already coming on out. Like I said, Judicial Watch has already confirmed there was classified information. There is classified information on that Huma Abedin Anthony Weiner laptop. It is not supposed to be there. It is a crime for it to be there. And so everybody's pointing fingers at each other. Now, something that's coming out of WikiLeaks that everybody's trying to distract from is they came up with the email of all of the friendly governments who were on board the clandestine program by President Obama and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton to create, fund, and train ISIS. Remember, Al-Qaeda was kind of fading away as the enemy we were all supposed to do the 2-minute hate on, and partly it's because of the name they chose. Al-Qaeda in Arabic literally translates the base, but in Arabic slang it means a toilet. And whoever put Al-Qaeda together may have been familiar with the Arabic language, but obviously was not familiar with the Arabic culture. And so they needed a new enemy that was going to kill kittens and behead people, pretend on special effects video. And they literally made ISIS. Just like in George Orwell's 1984, the government creates Emmanuel Goldstein to have an enemy to wag at the people, to get them all afraid and obedient and dependent. And apparently WikiLeaks has put out this email from the State Department showing how many other countries were on board with this covert support for ISIS. And to add punctuation to it, apparently the Iraqi army took over an ISIS military base in Mosul and found it supplied with U.S.-made missiles. And they had a photo showing the label, USA, DOD, blah, 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 blah. So, yeah, the U.S. actually created ISIS, just like they created Al-Qaeda, to use as a proxy to wag at you so you'll vote for them. Oh, vote for me, I'll save you from ISIS because they can't come near you or I'll cancel their paychecks or whatever they're going to say here. Now, there is a big push right now, and a gentleman named Dr. Piesnik is at the head of it, where they're talking about the information that is surfacing on this laptop linking a lot of political figures to Jeff Epstein's orgy island and pedophilia and child trafficking and all these other sensational things. Don't fall for it. This is a distraction. It's a limited hangout. Admission to a minor crime in order to keep the greater crimes concealed. And I'll give you a recent example. And I've mentioned this before. Back during the Whitewater hearings, Ken Starr dangled this little tawdry sex scandal involving oral sex in the Oval Office, a stained blue dress, and Monica Lewinsky, and the media focused on that, America focused on that, and they never looked at the real scandal behind Whitewater, which was that 1980s CIA gun-running operation into Nicaragua, violation of the Boland Amendment, violation of the Logan Act, and they were funding it all with cocaine smuggled back into the United States of America and sold to your children, primarily in the black neighborhoods. That was the real scandal behind Whitewater. But you're not supposed to see that. You're supposed to just look at the stained blue dress. And they're doing it again. They're going to try and throw out this Jeff Epstein, Orgy Island, Lolita Express, tawdry little sex scandal to get you looking in the wrong place. And don't fall for it. Because whatever happened on Jeff Epstein's Orgy Island, it doesn't really directly affect your life, does it? But corruption at the highest levels of the federal government, that affects us all, and that's why we have to be looking at that. Now, last Friday, when the FBI came on out and announced the reopening of the email investigation, we saw a lot of entities within the corporate media all of a sudden break ranks. And we saw reports of the WikiLeaks information on the front page of major newspapers. Then by Monday, somebody had yanked a leash, and the corporate media was back on board the Hillary bandwagon, except we're still seeing a lot of people straining at their leash. Over at MSNBC, Chris Matthews just went on this very short but to-the-point rant where if you like where the country is right now, if you like all the wars, if you like Obamacare, if you like the joblessness and everything, then go ahead and vote for Hillary Clinton. But if you think we are overdue for some major changes, then you need to go with Donald Trump. Now, Michael Moore, who is a Hillary sycophant, was out there with this bizarre rant about how men have to accept their 10,000-year reign is over. Hillary Clinton is going to be president, and we're going to have a powerful nation under the control of a woman, and it's the first time, and you're just going to have to get used to it. That you're not running the show anymore. Well, I think Hatshepsut, Cleopatra, Empress Theodora, Eleanor of Aquitaine, Isabel I of Castile and Aragon, Queen Mary I, Queen Elizabeth I, Queen Victoria of Great Britain, Catherine the Great of Russia, Olga of Kiev, and the Dowager Empress Cixi of China might have a few choice comments about Michael Moore's grasp of history. Plus, more recently, Maggie Thatcher. People like that. It's not this bizarre black and white, men have been in charge and now it's the rise of the woman. And I have sort of this love-hate relationship with Michael Moore because he's made some films I really like. Roger and Me, his first documentary. Huge fan of Canadian Bacon. And then he'll come out with this bizarre liberal nonsense that is absolutely not grounded in any kind of reality. And I have to wonder, what drugs is this guy on, and why isn't he sharing them with the rest of the class? Now, there's been another video leaked from Project Veritas. You're going to love this one. It's on the front page of WhatReallyHappened.com, and I implore you to copy it off and send it everywhere. Major Hillary donor at a Democratic fundraiser saying blacks are seriously messed up in the head. That's not exactly the language he used. The language he used would get the FCC down on our necks. But this one needs to go viral because Hillary is counting on that black vote to put her over the top. And her own supporters are saying these terrible things about the black population. And the voters need to see this. They need to know how Hillary and her supporters really do feel about them. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And the FBI all of a sudden is starting to post all kinds of interesting things online They posted the files from their first investigation into Hillary's email system, the one that documented the Title 18 violations that James Comey and Loretta Lynch said didn't really come up to the level of prosecutability. It's not worth prosecuting, but we're going to sue those global warming deniers out of existence. So there's definitely a faction fight within the FBI. Now, as you know, earlier this week, the FBI released their file on the investigation into Bill Clinton's pardon of Mark Rich, which was hugely controversial. And they were trying to figure out what was this. Was there more quid pro quo going on with this thing? And today, the FBI has released their file on Vince Foster, which is kind of an eerie Twilight Zone feel to it. And going through the documents, we're finding that the FBI had information that did, in fact, contradict the official story. There's a reference to the fact that there wasn't a gun found with the body at first. Most of that's been redacted out. And there's a report, we scanned it and put it on the front of WhatReallyHappened.com. They had a witness saying that it was a murder, that they saw 3 individuals in a van. They even got a partial license plate that were apparently down there in Fort Marcy Park planting the body. So somewhere inside the FBI, somebody's made the decision that the Clintons have really had enough fun at all of our expense, and maybe it's time, for them to move along. And, of course, for me and other people like Hugh Turley and Alan Favish and everybody else who's been on this Vince Foster case since the very, very beginning, it's a small but, very welcome vindication that we were right to be questioning the official story all along. Now, I have a question to those of you listening to this program who are with the FBI, and I'm pretty sure you're out there. It's only taken you 22 years to catch up with us in the independent media. Better late than never. Nice to see you. Welcome aboard. Here's my question. What would have happened all the way back in 1994 if the FBI, instead of playing thug and destroying the careers of those who spotted the obvious flaws in the official story, had actually properly investigated and arrested those responsible for the murder of the White House Deputy Counsel, the highest U.S. government official to die in office since John F. Kennedy? We might have avoided 3 presidential administrations convinced that they could do whatever they want to do and get away with it, whether it was murdering the White House Deputy Counsel, lying about Saddam's nuclear weapons to start a war of conquest, or scamming us all with 9/11, or human-caused global warming, or Obamacare. Think of all the pain and suffering that might have been avoided if the FBI had done their job 22 years ago. Just something for you FBI types to be thinking about while you're trying to fall asleep tonight. Another scandal we decided was worth a look back was the Jorge Cabrera scandal. And this was a very innocuous moment where there were some photos released showing Al Gore and then Hillary Clinton posed with this very rotund gentleman. But it became a scandal when it came on out that the rotund gentleman was a cocaine smuggler, a very successful one, who was also a heavy donor to Al Gore and the Clintons. And he got his picture taken with then First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton right in front of the White House Christmas tree. And the Justice Department tried to get all the pictures back, but this was already in the age of the Internet. Once it's on the Internet, it's out there. You don't get it back. But it's another reminder that we have had 3 decades of government steeped in drug money corruption. Let's take a couple of, actually we're coming up on a commercial break, then we're going to take a couple of phone calls here. Hillary's poll numbers are sliding, to nobody's surprise, everywhere except the corporate media, which is still out there saying, she can do it, really, trust her, she can do it. Don't look at the web, just listen to us when we tell you she's going to be a great president. Yeah, well, you told us Obama was going to be a great president too, and look how that worked out. We'll be back after these few words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to grab some quick phone calls. Jim in Vancouver, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, Mike, I caught you. Maybe I missed a minute or so, but I had heard you mention finally Dr. Steve Pieczenik. That's how you say his name.
Okay.
In regard to that second little video that he did on pedophilia. But the big video where he announced the coup by the Clintons and the counter coup by the intelligence community, which he is representing, I didn't hear you talk about. I've been following this guy. I found him through Alex Jones, but I follow his own website for a long time, and I think he's bona fide. He says there's a coup in progress.
Well, we didn't talk about his video, but earlier in the show I said there are clear indications of a faction fight both within the FBI itself and the federal government as a whole. And
that's what this is about.
Yeah,
I didn't hear the first couple minutes.
I'm in agreement on that. I'm in agreement on that. Okay.
Good, and it's Pieczenik.
Pieczenik. All right, I'll keep that in mind. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to switch to Clint in Las Vegas. Aloha, Clint. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Clint, are you there? Going once? Going twice? All right, well, we're going to go back to the news here. Latest Los Angeles Times poll puts Donald Trump 4 points ahead of Clinton, and the trend is clearly out there. Back on October 25th, Clinton was ahead of Trump by 1 point in the same poll, and now Trump is ahead by 4. Trump widens his lead in Arizona. Trump has increased his lead in Texas to 12. That's getting into the area where vote fraud becomes rather difficult to pull off convincingly, especially with all the Donald Trump supporters wearing red on Election Day. Remember, if you don't have something red, now's a good time to head on down to the shopping malls and get a little something extra for next Tuesday. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Mike in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah. Is this me?
Yeah, this is you. You're on the air. What's on your mind?
Oh, okay. I just discovered your program about a week ago. What a great program. I think you're doing a terrific job. I want to make a comment about the FBI Director, James Comey, his statement he made on July 5th, 2016. I looked it up. I was looking at it. Now, this is a partial quote. Okay, quote. There is evidence that they were extremely careless in their handling of very sensitive, highly classified information. End of quote.
Yes.
Now, I've got a question for James Comey and, by extension, Hillary and everybody who's listening. Okay. And I learned this from Trey Gowdy. He's a very knowledgeable person.
Yes.
Okay. What is the difference between being extremely careless and grossly negligent? Because intent to harm the country is treason, according to Trey Gowdy.
Well, let me back up here a little tiny bit, because FBI Director James Comey was trying to put a fast one over on the American people by saying they didn't have any evidence that Hillary Clinton intended to do wrong. But that is not required under Title 18. Under Title 18, Section 793, it says specifically, exposure of national secrets through negligence is a crime, punishable by up to 10 years in prison and a permanent ban on holding any public office. And so that was where Comey was kind of fibbing a little tiny bit. Intent is not needed.
Yeah, okay, yeah. The phony little phrase is extremely careless. Okay, because Trey Gowdy was asking, what is the difference between grossly negligent, which is a crime? According to the statute, grossly negligence is a crime. It's not treason, but it is a crime. It's a lesser crime under treason. Okay, that's the point Trey Gowdy was saying. He asked a question. What is the difference between extremely careless, James Comey's words, and grossly negligent? He says there is no difference.
No, there is no difference here. The difference is if Comey says extremely careless, he gets to go on living. If he says grossly negligent and we're charging her, then he's going to die under suspicious circumstances.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
What do you think James Comey's I know you can't read his mind, but what's the motive here? What's going on? Is this guy being blackmailed? I know there's a coup going on inside the EA. I've heard about it. The FBI, they're fighting each other, and maybe there's pressure put on. What do you think's going on here?
Well, what's going on here is we have a government that has, for the last 30 years at least, and probably even longer than that, been steeped in drug money corruption. Both the Bushes and the Clintons trace their political fortunes back to that mid-1980s CIA gun and drug running operation to Nicaragua out of Arkansas under then-Governor Bill Clinton. And basically, not too long ago, there was a bank. HSBC was caught laundering drug money, and they got a sweetheart deal from the then U.S. Attorney for New York for a deferred prosecution, meaning they're not actually going to take the case to court in exchange for a small settlement, which amounted to about 5 weeks of HSBC's profits. Now, the U.S. Attorney for New York, who gave them that sweetheart deal, was Loretta Lynch, who was then promoted to Attorney General for the entire country. And on the board of directors of HSBC, while all this was going down, was James Comey. So that is what's linking it all together, is the drug money corruption. And it all centers on that Clinton Foundation.
Wow. So James Comey, the FBI director, has got his finger in this pie.
Oh, yeah, and he's got a lot of company. He's got a lot of company in there as well. And it's one big cross-connected Gordian knot of corruption. And, it may be that the only solution to it is going to be the one that Alexander the Great had.
Okay. So, I don't... James Comey should recluse himself. The Attorney General should recluse herself for the little incident on the
No. They're making the big bucks for standing up there and protecting, the narcocracy. That's their job. That's why they have these high positions and really large paychecks. Their job is to prevent the rule of law in this country when it comes to the narcocracy.
So, unless there's a independent investigation going on by an outside independent source, it's like the wolf guarding the hen house. How can this dam break? How can we get around this?
Well, after it all comes crashing down the way the Soviet Union did, I suggest we convene a revolutionary tribunal and hunt all these people down and put them on a trial in a people's court, saying you misbehaved. We're going to we're going to make you all poor, because nothing hurts a money junkie more than making them be poor like ordinary people. Take away all their money, put them in Section 8 housing, give Hillary a job cleaning toilets somewhere at minimum wage. That is a fate worse than prison, worse than death. But that's what they deserve.
All who run for president, I'm reading this off my little syllogism here, my sorties. All who run for president will lie. All who lie will be found out. All who are found out will lose credibility. All who lose credibility will lose trust. Okay, now this is why government cannot be trusted, because the politicians, this is what our founders said, they must be chained down with checks and balances.
That's right.
So I think that, you know what, I think if we look in the mirror, I think who's got the blame for this is really us, the people.
No, I disagree. I disagree.
Really?
I disagree. It's not, we didn't do anything wrong. It was done to us. Okay? We are the victims here of a gigantic swindle that's been going on for close to 100 years to take this republic that was created by the Founding Fathers and turn it into a plantation of debt slaves for the private central bankers. Anyway, Mike, I've given you enough time. We've got to get back to the news here. Did Clint ever come back? No. Okay, all right. So we're going to go on back to the news here. All right, WRAL poll, Trump is charging ahead in North Carolina. And here's where it gets a little interesting. The other day I was talking about the Daybreak poll out at USC and the breakdown in demographics, where Hillary's support is primarily among young people who are not old enough to remember how corrupt Bill Clinton's presidency was, let alone his term as governor of Arkansas. And that is some of her strongest support. In the latest poll, the millennial voters are turning away from her. That's a big part of her support. Along, the black voters are turning away from her. The woman voters are turning away from her. She's in serious, serious trouble. She's now trailing in the polls. And talk about irony. Now that Hillary Clinton is trailing in all the polls, she's the one out there saying, oh, these are all being rigged. The corporate media has turned on me. They're helping Donald Trump steal the presidency from me, and it's mine. It was promised to me. It's my turn. And blah, 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 blah. But that's... more projection is what it is, really, here. Now, the GOP has come forward alleging major vote fraud, once again, in Broward County, Florida. The earlier report was that GOP officials had noticed election officials opening the mail-in absentee ballots early. They're not supposed to do that until Election Day. But they were opening them and seeing what the votes were going to be, and now they've discovered votes for a certain candidate were being set aside without any explanation. In other words, they're going through the mail-in ballots, and they're cherry-picking the ones for Hillary to send along forward, and the ones for Donald Trump and anybody else are going to mysteriously disappear. It's right there in front. You know, we're going to be in 2000 again. Both sides are lawyering up. There's going to be challenges. It's going to go to the Supreme Court, which, by the way, with only 8 judges, could theoretically deadlock and tie. We might not actually know who's supposed to be president until Christmas this year. Now, for those of you who were worried about Julian Assange, he's fine. He's okay, even though his internet connection's been cut off by the Ecuadorian embassy. He did a telephone interview with a free software convention today. So he's fine. He's healthy. He's not been kidnapped and being tortured by the CIA or anything like that here. Turning to the war zones, emphasis on the plural, U.S.-supported terrorists have shelled the Russian embassy in Damascus, and this is not the first time. And the United Nations is huffing up and saying, you shouldn't be doing that. Diplomats are supposed to be immune. And, of course, obviously the U.S.-supported terrorists want Russia out of Syria because Russia's just spoiled the whole game. And again, we know the U.S. is supporting these terrorists because every time the Syrian government forces or the Russians overrun one of these ISIS military bases, they find it stockpiled with American weapons. So I want you to think about something very carefully. What we have here is at the same time that we were all being told ISIS was this horrible enemy, this terrorist group that was going to invade our country and do all kinds of terrible things, park in the handicap spots or whatever else they were going to do. They were actually working for the U.S. government, for President Obama and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, who were spending your taxpayer dollars to send the machinery of death to ISIS, who would then use it on civilians in countries that have not done anything to us at all, other than live over valued natural resources. Now, treason, a lot of people are throwing that word around rather recklessly, so let's go back to its definition. The actual legal definition of treason is providing aid and comfort to the enemy in time of war. We are in the middle of a war on terror. ISIS are the terrorists. Obama and Hillary and a bunch of their cronies, now leaked out by WikiLeaks, have been providing aid and comfort to that enemy during that time of war. That's it. They have created treason. Now, from their point of view, it was all just smoke and mirrors anyway. That ISIS is actually working for the U.S. foreign policy, so they're not really an enemy. We just told you they were the enemy. And when you ordinary people lie, it's a crime. But when the government lies to you, well, that's just politics. You should just expect that. We actually got that from one of these State Department spokesmen coming on out and saying, of course we're going to lie to you. That's our job. Now, Amnesty International has issued yet another warning about white phosphorus being used by the Iraqi forces in Mosul are going to cause civilian suffering. Now, if you're not familiar with white phosphorus, it's actually banned as a weapon. It's only allowed if you need to create a smoke screen during a retreat. But unfortunately, we've seen time and time again where it's being used as an incendiary bomb to simply set fire to huge swaths of residential neighborhoods. Israel was doing that to Gaza. We've seen it being done by the Saudi forces in Yemen. And it's terrible stuff. If it gets on you, there's no way to put it out. You can't throw water on it. You can't put a fire extinguisher. It'll go on burning right down to your very bones. It is one of the worst, most horrible weapons that can be used against a civilian population. And, gee, I wonder where the heck the Iraqi forces are getting all this white phosphorus. Probably the same place that ISIS was getting all those missiles. Now, it has reached a point where the International Criminal Court is about to open a probe into war crimes committed in Afghanistan by the United States government. It's about time, I think. The U.S. is continuing to rattle their sabers all over the globe, and they have sent an SSBN, the USS Pennsylvania, to visit Guam. This is the first time a nuclear ballistic missile submarine has been sent that far to the western Pacific since the 1980s. We had one here in Pearl Harbor for a while, mostly because it suffered a mechanical breakdown and needed to put in someplace for repairs. But these are very expensive assets. They are carefully guarded. Generally, their locations are not being revealed. So they're making a statement. The U.S. is making a statement by publicly putting on display an SSBN nuclear ballistic missile submarine in Guam. It's a warning to China, is what's going on. 24 Trident missiles, 8 warheads each. You can work out the math. It's World War III and it can. Just one of those nuclear ballistic missile submarines has more explosive power than every single bomb dropped in World War II put together, except, of course, for the ones over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. All right, there's the music. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Getting on back to the election fraud uncovered in Broward County, Florida. The GOP is filing a lawsuit. Apparently, the election officials got caught opening up the mail-in ballots, which they're not supposed to be doing ahead of time, and literally throwing Republican ballots away. This is a travesty. If Donald Trump succeeds in overcoming the election fraud next week, my next big project is going to be a complete scrubbing out of this crooked election system. I know we can have honest elections. I know how to do it. We have 2 years to get an honest election system back into this country and get this country back under the control of the people. All right, we're going to go back to the phones. Glenn in Philadelphia, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Bit of a semantic problem for you. Nobody can or will be charged with or convicted of treason because treason is a war crime, and war in this context means that there is a declaration of war pending. The peacetime analog of treason is espionage. Okay, so these people could be charged with and convicted of and punished for espionage. This country hasn't declared war on anyone since World War II. That was part of the whole policy of police actions under the UN in Korea and police actions in Vietnam. And now we have these nondescript, proxy wars in foreign lands overthrowing countries without declarations of war. So we should be talking about getting these people brought up on charges of espionage.
Well, you're not going to get an argument from me. You're not going to get an argument from me. I think one of the reasons they're circling the wagons around the email scandal as much as they are is that Hillary Clinton was replaying the 1996 Chinagate scandal, selling U.S. secrets to foreign interests in exchange for donations, using her weak email server to deliver the goods and her so-called charitable foundation to collect and launder the payments. It's too obvious for her not to be doing it, especially since the Clintons have done it at least once before that we know of.
Right. And the absence of a declaration of war is also the reason why Barack Obama is not the commander-in-chief of the U.S. Armed Forces. The last president to function in the role of commander-in-chief of the Armed Forces was Harry S. Truman, because that was when a declaration of war was pending. Since the time of Harry S. Truman, nobody, none of the presidents, has actually legitimately, according to the Constitution, had the role of Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. The Commander-in-Chief is the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. And,
Interesting.
So they
okay.
love they love when we scream treason because they know that they can't be touched by it. And I'm so tired of this Commander-in-Chief. He's sure as heck not my commander. He's my employee. And he's not the commander of anybody in the military either. And they just don't want they de-emphasize this stuff and don't want us to think about it or know it.
Well, I think that's an important distinction, is for the military to understand the president is not their superior commanding officer. Thanks an awful lot for that. We're going to let you go. We have another caller waiting on the line, but we're going to have to hold that until after we do our station identification for the top of the hour. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're going to go to Kerry in Oregon. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. You really had me confused a couple of months ago when you said the election wasn't for another year.
I don't recall saying that.
I thought I heard you say it about 2 or 3 times. Okay, if you didn't say it, you didn't say it. I thought you said the election wasn't for another year.
I don't think so.
All right. You're talking about Michael Moore. Have you seen his video on Trump going to the chairman of Ford and telling him that if he moves his plant down to Mexico, he's going to throw a 35% tariff on the cars coming back?
I haven't actually seen the video, but I know Trump did in fact go to Ford and say we have to bring the manufacturing back to this country, and Trump is absolutely right on that.
Well, Michael Moore had a video of it, and he did a good job. I mean, that was his point. He was behind Trump on it. And this morning you talked about the pipeline protest, and you probably knew that Jill Stein was out there, part of the protest,
yes.
And she was even arrested for some graffiti she put on there. So she's a real trooper. I know you don't talk about her too much because we're all behind Trump this time. But anyway, we've got to give her credit for that.
No,
and,
I mean, she's done very well. Susan Sarandon is supporting her. But at this point, it's one of 2 choices next week. It's going to be Hillary or Trump, and anybody who's saying, oh, show your protests by voting third party and everything, they're just trying to take votes away from Donald Trump.
Yeah, I understand. You mentioned Alexander the Great. What's that solution you're talking about?
Oh, the legend of the Gordian knot. Basically, when he started his military campaign going into Central Asia, he went through this area. It was called Gordos, and they had a legend. There was a giant rope knot tied around a post, and there'd been a prophecy that the first person who could figure out how to undo the knot would go on to conquer all of Asia. And so Alexander just took his sword out and chopped it.
Okay. The last thing I wanted to ask is, you're talking about drugs and the government and CIA and DEA and all this stuff. I still have my reservations about Mike Rupert. I read his book, Crossing the Rubicon. He did an excellent job on that.
Yes.
And he, quote, committed suicide up at a friend's ranch in California. And I've always had some serious doubts about that one. I think he was a great guy. He's sincere. What are your thoughts on it?
Mike Rupert did a lot of good work. So did Gary Webb. I mean, it's not like there's just one source for all this information coming on out about government-sanctioned drug smuggling. Bo Greitz had some videos out there going all the way back to Vietnam about how people in the Bush administration were making money off the heroin that was being smuggled back into the United States from Vietnam. Mel Gibson even did a movie about it called Air America. Before I let you go here, right. I think what may have confused you when I said the vote is next year or something, I was saying we've got 2 years to get an honest election system in, because obviously in 2 years there's going to be new elections for representatives. And so that's the time limit that we have to get an honest, verifiable election system into this country.
Okay.
Okay.
Real
quick, because you're taking up a lot of time.
Yeah. I don't believe Mike Rupert committed suicide. That's all.
Well, there's a lot of people I don't believe committed suicide, including Gary Webb here. All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to James in Northern California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. On the subject of treason, I just wanted to say that there's kind of a dormant provision in the Constitution called misprision of treason that's been around for over a couple of hundred years. It's in Article 1, Section 10. It prohibits states or their subdivisions from entering into any treaty or alliance with foreign political organizations.
Okay,
that's
hang on. You're confusing the issue here. What you're talking about is basically the Logan Act. Foreign policy is the exclusive preserve of the executive branch and the State Department. Misprision is a word that can be applied to anything, and it simply says you're aware of a crime going on, but you did not report it to authorities. And misprision can be applied to treason, can be applied to littering, can be applied to anything going on. And usually it's applied to people who are caught up in sweeps for crimes that obviously knew the crime was being committed and failed to report it, which in the case of Hillary and all of her people, even though State Department employees who were not directly involved in the criminality that was going on could be hit with a charge of misprision because they knew what was going on and failed to take action.
Well, I used it. I served my local city council and the mayor with misprision of treason, legal paperwork, videotaped it and had it date stamped by the clerk.
Okay, James, you keep calling in. Hey, you keep calling into the show with this story, and we've already been over this story. And great that you filed a lawsuit, but we're basically trying to keep our focus at the national level, going into next week's election. So we're going to let you go.
I've never called in on this subject, but.
Well, I guess it was somebody else who called in on it, but really, I'm not interested in talking about any individual's lawsuit against small local authorities right now. We have to keep our focus. Let's switch over to Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I'm Michael. I had lunch with a friend of mine who discussing the election, and we're talking about the death of Antonin Scalia.
Yes.
And we were talking about the email 2 or 3 days prior when Podesta was talking about what work about to happen or something. But he came up with two really good reasons why he thinks he was murdered. And the first one was, just like the 2000 election, when it went to the Supreme Court, who would be a person that you would need to get out of the way for that? Secondly, the email controversy and all that, the email server thing, was going on even when Scalia was dead and before he was dead, and she knew she had to suborn the Justice Department, and Scalia might have stood in the way of that as well, along with the Second Amendment and everything else. But Scalia was a major roadblock to her.
Yeah, he was. He was conservative. He was also thinking about that affirmative action needed to come on down. We're going to take a second to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining the network. As you can tell, it's kind of a contentious show here today. But even the day it happened, the way that Scalia supposedly died, where they said his body was found on top of the covers on a bed that had not been disturbed that night. I mean, that doesn't get any more obvious than that.
And he was immediately, of course, burned. His body was burned.
Actually, no, he wasn't cremated. That was put out there. But he was immediately embalmed, which renders an autopsy incapable of finding possible cause of death.
Mike, I got one thing, and what I brought up in this conversation I had this morning was, if Trump were to lose, I believe that Hillary would hound him, and if not, Hillary would be as vindictive as hell, and he wouldn't be able to do business in the United States again, TV, whatever, and he'd have to get out. And that's probably the way any of us who have been against her will have to be. She'll come and get us all.
Revenge is kind of an expensive luxury. If you go back and you look at the dead bodies list, there are always targets that represent a threat to the Clintons. Once a scandal is over and done with and it's gone, they kind of walk away. That's why so many of Bill Clinton's sexual assault victims are still alive. It just isn't worth the trouble to go on out and do anything about them that would just bring back more attention. Right now, I would say that the two people who've got to really be sweating right now are Huma Abedin and Anthony Weiner, because they are a major, major threat to Hillary, not just for the election, but for any possible investigations that are going to follow on. Because all of this is not going to stop next week. Even if Hillary steals the election, the investigations are going to go on. We're setting up for a repeat of Richard Nixon's second term in office, where he stole the election and went into the White House dodging investigators and ultimately being forced to resign.
I think if she wins, Michael, that she'll kill the investigation like is Peter Kadzik, the guy who's in charge of it now. I think it will just go down the rabbit hole. Congress, which has done nothing really, and they ignore it with impunity, will just... Well,
I agree. Congress is corrupt. They're all involved on the take here. The unknown factors, the American people and our rank-and-file military, who are fed up with what's going on here. And it's like I told a caller yesterday. We're seeing all these people saying, oh, Hillary's going to steal it. You might as well get used to it. The American people will do nothing about it. But you know something? History is full of rulers who made the mistake of thinking they could get away with something one more time. Charles I, Ceausescu, Mussolini, Louis XVI. History is full of rulers who had that attitude, yes, I can do one more abuse, and those peasants won't do a thing about it. And then all of a sudden the Bastille gets torn down. It does happen, and we're dangerously close right now in this country. I don't want to see it happen, but I can see the signs all around me.
Do you think if Trump is elected that he will really press an investigation of Clinton Foundation and Hillary Clinton, even Obama?
I don't know as much about Obama, but Trump is talking about Trey Gowdy as the Attorney General. And Trey Gowdy, he's first of all, he's upright, he's straight, he's going to do the investigative job. And right now he's very angry because this entrenched narcocracy have been openly abusive of him. And, you know, there is a saying in politics, in fact, it's also a saying in Hollywood, be very careful who you step on your way to the top, because you're going to meet him again on your way back down.
Well, you know, my friend made the comparison to Gerald Ford pardoning Nixon and not going after it, and Obama saying, well, let's look forward and not backward. And my reaction to that was that Trump has made it central to his campaign, the corruption. He's made it central to his campaign that he's going to go after Hillary. And I believe that he's going to go after Hillary. And I believe that she can't afford to have that happen, and neither can Obama. Oh,
it's not just Hillary and Obama and Bill Clinton. It's everybody who's been tangled up with that Clinton Foundation, everybody who's been tangled up with that CIA gun and drug running operation. This will hit the Bush family as well as the Clintons. That's why they're all afraid. And, you know, Donald Trump, if he succeeds in winning the election next week, he'd better double his security. Because he's got as many elements in our society hating him as hated John F. Kennedy.
Yep, that's if he wins.
And that, well, if he loses, you know, all he's going to do is go off and, you know, start Trump media, and I'm going to send him a resume, and hopefully Donald will, you know, give me a decent paying job for doing all this stuff.
Mike, he would not be able to get, you know, a license to go to the men's room granted by a Clinton administration, let alone start a media thing. There's just no way he could do business in the United States.
I disagree, you know, but we don't need to go into it. We got a lot of callers waiting online, so I'm going to let you go here. And let's switch back over to Dennis in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Dennis from New York calling you from Florida. I'll probably be down here for most of the winter speaking to you.
Okay.
So, Michael, I was a Ron Paul supporter back in 2012. I came down here to Florida to try to get in by the convention. I never saw such a police state in my life. I was getting eyeballed by the jackbooted thugs that were guarding this place with razor ribbon around it. And I'm looking at what's happening now in the news and all of the news stations. You know, I mean, we know which ones are so pro-Hillary, and then we got the Fox News. And I haven't forgotten what they did to Ron Paul, you know, with Chris Wallace. And even people who support Trump think Chris Wallace is, oh, he's great, you know. These people are all phony. They're in there for entertainment or to get ratings at our expense, and they really don't care whether or not we get change or not. But what really scares me is the fact that I'm looking at these numbers and the fraud and the supposed poll numbers are coming out with, and I just saw this thing on your website where they supposedly let out what's supposed to come out on election night. And I say to myself, how can they come out with these projected the electoral college numbers? I mean, they've got this whole thing wrapped up already. And my question to the American people is this: I don't think that they're really going to wind up revolting. I think we have so many sheep in this country today. They're just going to take it and just roll over, and that's going to be it.
Again, I get all these phone calls saying, you know, the country's being taken over by the New World Order. Just get used to it. I refuse. I'm sorry, I refuse. And when you have enough Americans refusing, you're going to have a government that's completely paralyzed. If Hillary Clinton steals that election next week, she's going to go into the Oval Office dodging investigators, dodging all of her supporters who are going to have their hands out for favors, and she's going to have an American people that aren't going to listen to anything she has to say. They're not going to fill out the paperwork. They're not going to put the stickers on things. They're not going to pay the bills, and they're not going to send their kids off to be killed and crippled in the wars of conquest. If Hillary Clinton steals that election, this country is finished. It's going to collapse the way the Soviet Union did. And it may, even if Trump wins, it could still collapse, but at least there's a chance that we could arrest the decline and turn it around. Okay? Dennis, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Bruce in Texas. Aloha, Bruce. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, I thought maybe this topic is going to be kind of off base or trivial, but the caller before last brought up some points, so maybe it is topical. Do you recall seeing a book or reading a book published in the 1990s on Hillary? It was called Hell to Pay.
I think I heard of it. I never read it.
Okay, I suggest if you have access to the web at this moment, maybe go to Amazon and search it and look at who the author was. Okay, and
well, you know, don't let us live in suspense. Who's the author?
Okay, it's Barbara Olson.
Oh yes, of course.
Does that ring a bell?
It sure does.
Yeah. Her husband was Ted Olson, the Solicitor General, at the time of 9/11, and supposedly she died in the plane as it careened into one of the World Trade Center towers.
Yes.
Now, also there was someone who was in the FBI, chief investigator, John O'Neill, who was investigating the USS Cole incident, and he was looking at evidence of a missile striking that ship instead of a boatload of explosives, as the official story was. So he was reassigned. He was given a job in the World Trade Center as chief of security, and his office was placed right where the first airplane hit.
A lot of very convenient deaths happen on 9/11, and you know, anytime they're going to just do something like this, they're going to say, "Well, what can we use? What can we use this for?" I'll give you a good example: the Oklahoma City bombing. Congress, because of public pressure, had been forced to call for hearings into what happened at that church in Waco, Texas. And the FBI had collected all the paperwork from Texas and everywhere, and they had put it in that Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, and it was all destroyed in the explosion. Actually, a lot of it wasn't destroyed. The guy who married Claire and I, the minister, was near Oklahoma City when it happened, and he drove on down to volunteer to go on in and look for the wounded. Had to show his ID 6 times before he got to the building. And he was reporting that all of these guys in suits and ties were taping plastic over the shattered ends of the load-bearing beams to hide the explosives damage, and they were picking up boxes of paper and just taking them away. This while people were still in the rubble screaming for help.
And that's something.
Yep.
You know, there's video of World Trade Center 7 before it collapsed, of some guy in a suit and then like maybe some aide or worker of some kind, like maybe a bellhop, and they're wheeling around this came out in the FOIA release from about 5 years ago, and they have a stretcher and they have boxes with a coat with a blanket over it, and they're wheeling it by like it's a patient, you know, and they're taking something out of the building before it goes up.
Well, a lot of stuff went.
Going back to
a lot of stuff went missing.
Going back to Barbara Olson. I'm gonna hit it real quick. Then we can go on the next call.
Well, actually, we just ran out of time. I'm sorry. I was trying to go you along here. We're gonna have to let you go, Bruce. Back with more phone calls after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to grab a couple more phone calls, and then we're going to close the line so that I can get some more real news out there. Chris in Las Vegas, aloha. What's on your mind today?
Well, thank you so very much, Michael. I thought I might share a couple of things that I'd come across just recently. And one, I watched the International Financial Institute on C-SPAN here a couple of weeks ago, and the stoic old soul of the panel, the chairman that was running the discussion, his main mantra he kept repeating over and over was, hold the course steady as you go. Basically, keep the status quo. Thought that the populist disputes, he was talking about Euro and Germany and those different, the Euro stuff, would blow over in a few months. The populists would settle down and be business as usual. However, this morning I got a very intriguing email of two-part series called Bombshell, The Clinton Cartel Exposed, Part 1 and 2 by Call of Duty Goddess. And they do a very incredible journalistic investigative effort in tying the links going back to the Bush appointment of Comey to his U.S. attorney job back then.
Okay, we have, unfortunately, all of a sudden, a bunch of people who call in with a long list of something to talk about and use up a lot of time here. Can you get to the point? Is this going someplace? Are you just in love with the... can we sum up, okay?
All right. It ties a very evil, wicked web of serpents that are in the top of this whole administration of the Obama, Loretta Lynch, James Comey, it goes back to Sandy Berger, the Whitewater, the Clinton Foundation, Hillary Clinton in particular with her Rose Law Firm, the original law firms of Loretta Lynch. They're all in bed together, been in cahoots together. It's one global crime conspiracy running this country. And that's about it. Thank you very much, Michael.
Okay, thank you very much for the phone call. That's what we mean by the narcocracy. It's all tangled up with that CIA gun and drug running operation into Nicaragua in the mid-1980s, and the U.S. end of the gun and drug pipeline was in Arkansas under then-Governor Bill Clinton. That's where it all began. Or that's where it all really took off. I'm sure they were all corrupt to begin with, because the CIA likes to hunt such people down. All right, Tom in Florida, real quick, and then we're going to close the phone lines. What's on your mind?
Good day, Michael. Yes, I want to talk about Monica Lewinsky. He does have the DNA for Danny Williams. If they do want to do the DNA test with Danny to prove Bill Clinton is the father, that's number one. Number two, I don't know if you listen to news, but Jeb Bush and George Bush both voted for Hillary Clinton. So what does that tell you, Michael? But getting back to the dress, Monica does have the DNA of Bill Clinton, and she needs to give that DNA to Danny Williams Clinton, and let's expose this in a commercial for Trump. That will really shock the media world once they prove that, like you said yesterday, Michael, Bill Clinton is a deadbeat dad. He's not but a deadbeat, and he should be paying this young man if that's his son. That's all I got to say, and basically, let's just see how this election rolls, Michael.
All right,
thanks. It's going to be very interesting.
All right, thanks an awful lot for the phone call here. First of all, we already know the Bushes are going to be voting for Hillary Clinton because their original plan coming out of Iran-Contra was to have two dynastic ruling families handing the White House back and forth to maintain the illusion there was still some kind of a choice. Bush to Clinton to Clinton to Bush to Bush to Clinton. This election was supposed to be Hillary Clinton against Jeb Bush. And Jeb Bush just couldn't get any traction with the voters. And Donald Trump got inside, and that's when everybody started hitting the panic button. All right, last phone call. Jay in Los Angeles, what's on your mind?
Hey, thanks for taking my call. Anthony's Luna's computer was, Anthony's router was seized. Okay, Doug Hagman today called the Alex Jones show and just revealed this piece of evidence here that there was a child sex slave ring has been found with connections to Bill Clinton and Hillary and Middle East countries like Saudi Arabia.
Okay, Jay, we've already covered this, and this is a distraction This is a replay of the stained blue dress to get us to look at a tawdry sex scandal and not pay attention to the war crimes, treason, and corruption that is also revealed in those emails. And I am being flooded by emails from people saying, you must cover this, you have to show this on your show. Well, you know, and they're just, it's obvious how desperate they are to try and get everybody looking at Jeff Epstein's Orgy Island so that they are not looking at what Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama have been doing with your tax dollars. Got to take a break for commercials. Closing the phone lines. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And getting on back to the war zones. Outside of the United States, outside of our election, the propaganda machine is still out there trying to demonize Russia. And Hillary Clinton is still out there claiming that Russia is behind the email leak and Russia's behind Donald Trump, even though the FBI and now many of the corporate media are saying there's nothing to support this. There is nothing to support this claim from Hillary's camp that this is all an evil plot by the evil Vladimir Putin to do evil and whatever. You can almost smell the panic that's out there. So over in Great Britain, they're screaming Russia is posing a threat to Great Britain. No, they're not. Just step back for a moment and take a look at the world for the last 20 years. Who is it who's doing all the invading? Who is it who's doing all the drone striking? Who is it who's doing all the overthrows and coup d'etats? It's not Russia. Story coming out of Press TV. Nuclear tensions between the U.S. and Russia reach dangerous point. And it's all being driven from the U.S. side. Russia's building a Death Star. I love this one article that came on out from Counterpunch, how Putin derailed the West, which is actually a good thing, because we have been seeing this clear attempt by the United States to simply take control of the world. And we know this has all been U.S. policy going back to the Project for the New American Century, which was a think tank that basically came on out saying we need, we're the only remaining superpower. Let's act like one and take over the rest of the world, and we need this vast military buildup and all these other things. And it's going to take a while unless there's a new Pearl Harbor, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more. And the last line in this article, coming out of Counterpunch, it's going to take a long time before Washington gets the message that the world is no longer its oyster. The sooner they figure it out, the better it will be for everyone. That is absolutely bang spot on target. The U.S. government is still viewing the rest of the world as their own personal domain to do whatever they feel like doing with. And the rest of the world is saying, I don't think so, not anymore. Now, the U.S. Congress is being asked to address human rights condition in Bahrain, meaning that Bahrain is next on the list to have their government overthrown and replaced with an obedient U.S. puppet. And by the way, I want to make a point here. Over the last several years, we have seen the New World Order. In fact, it goes back even longer than that. Since the end of World War II, we've seen the New World Order and its manifestations overthrowing governments and replacing them with puppet rule. Iran, 1953. Chile, 1973. Ukraine, that's still a mess. Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen, Libya, trying to do it to Syria. Do you realize they're doing it to this country? With this Hillary Clinton campaign, they're trying to overthrow what's left of our democracy and impose a puppet ruler on this country, like they weren't already puppets enough for Israel. But you should be concerned. Now, over in the European Union, they have finally acknowledged that citizens of the European Union are free to boycott Israel as a nonviolent form of protest against the policies of the Israeli government. Now, of course, Israel's attitude about all of this is it's anti-Semitic and it's Jew hate and it must be controlled and you're not allowed to say bad things about us no matter what we do. And they're doing it in this country, which should underscore to everybody that Israel and its minions have no respect for the Bill of Rights. They don't want you to have freedom of speech. Boycotts are a recognized form of nonviolent protest, and it's protected by the First Amendment. But Israel doesn't care. Meanwhile, over in Palestine, Abbas is asking Great Britain for an apology for the Balfour Declaration from 1917, which was when Great Britain basically got on board this idea of carving out a big chunk of Palestine and giving it to the Jews for Israel. Now, Great Britain didn't actually have the authority to go into Palestine and carve chunks off of it, but they did anyway. And Palestine says it's time for Great Britain to acknowledge that mistake and apologize. Sorry about that. Much as the way President Clinton actually signed an apology to the people of Hawaii for illegally stealing their country. Didn't give it back. Just said, we feel really bad about it. We're going to keep it. We're going to keep Hawaii. But, yeah, we did wrong and we feel bad about it. Now, getting on to the economic news, story out of Veterans Now. Thug-like behavior from major banks becoming the norm. And they're talking about how these major banks, as they become more criminal at the top, are becoming more and more abusive at the bottom. High fees, procedural blocks, literally saying, what are you taking money out of the bank for? It's none of their business, it's your money. And they're trying to get us used to this idea that we must answer to the bankers for everything we do with our money. And that, too, is fascism. The corporate media, we don't call them the mainstream. The new mainstream is over here. Corporate media is continuing to have very, very hard times. The Wall Street Journal is having to cut back. They're losing readers and advertisers. The New York Times reported a 95.7% fall in quarterly profits. We're seeing the decline of corporate media, the rise of the independent media. And I don't have any sympathy for them. They did it to themselves by standing up there and saying, oh yes, trust us, Saddam Hussein has nuclear weapons, humans are warming the world, Hillary's going to be a great president. So who's going to pay attention to them? Now, what's really interesting, probably most of you have seen the movie Network, which was written by Paddy Chayefsky. It was one of his most brilliant screenplays. It won 4 Academy Awards. And the movie is famous for that iconic scene of the character Howard Beale screaming into the TV camera, I'm mad as heck and I'm not going to take this anymore. But looking into the movie's backstory, where it goes from there, is how the CEO of the conglomerate that owns the network, the character's name is Arthur Jensen, convinces Beale to start pushing propaganda that is pro-business on his show. Now, as a result, the audience shrinks, the ratings drop, ad revenues go down. The network is struggling for money, but Jensen refuses to allow any change to Beale's show because Beale is putting out the propaganda to the American people that Beale wants to put on out there. And it all ends when network management has Beale assassinated on air. Now, I don't expect televised shootings of the prostitutes and correspondents anytime soon, but Chayefsky did appreciate the dynamics that keeps bad news, false news, propaganda on the air and good news or accurate news off. And he predicted the financial disaster that results, and we are there now. The corporate media is they're running intensely in the red. They're being propped up by their corporate owners so long as the corporate media still looks like they're in charge of the minds of America. And if they're not, in this next election, if Trump overcomes the election fraud, those corporate backers are going to start putting away their checkbooks. And all those prostitutes and correspondents on those network TV news shows are going to have to make do without those big fat paychecks. And we will go back to a country where media is diffused, dispersed. There's a diversity of opinion. It's not all under the control of just 6 corporations, but there are going to be thousands and thousands of independent media outlets presenting differing points of view to the American people so that they can see the different points of view and decide for themselves what is best. That's what diversity of information is supposed to provide. Thomas Jefferson once said, it's the highest duty of every American citizen to keep themselves fully informed so they can make good choices. But sitting there and listening to a TV network that's under the control of just a few people is not being fully informed. You're being force-fed what that person wants you to think. And that was never intended. Now, one of our callers into the show earlier was talking about Obamacare and health insurance. The price of health insurance has risen an average of 22% since last year under Obamacare. It is now unaffordable in most states without some kind of government subsidy. They're trying to make you dependent on the government because dependency is slavery. Every tyranny and dictatorship in history sets up the system so you have to go to the government for anything that you need, for your food, for your fuel, ration cards, because that keeps you dependent, enslaved, and obedient. That's what King George III was trying to do to the American colonies, which is what led to the American Revolution. Trying to make us dependent on paper banknotes loaned at interest by the Bank of England. Make us dependent on the knitting mills of Manchester and Leeds for our cloth. Making us dependent on the British East India Company for various other needs of life. You're not allowed to make that stuff for yourself. You will buy it from our factories. And you will buy it with banknotes you borrow at interest from the Bank of England. In a lot of ways, our country is back in the same evils that led to the Declaration of Independence and the Revolution. Up in Minnesota, Obamacare prices are jumping an average of 60% in a single year. And they're openly admitting it's an emergency situation because the Obamacare exchanges in Minnesota are on the verge of collapse. But in typical government fashion, no matter how badly they botch something up, they're just going to force it on you and tax you and penalize you until you accept it. Then they can declare it to be an overwhelming success. Now then, Obamacare is now forcing companies to drop workers from private insurance programs. Remember when this all came out? If you like your plan, you can keep your plan. It was another one of those Obama lies. Obamacare is now forcing companies to drop workers from private insurance. They're going to be driving those private insurance companies out of business because only the approved, favored Obamacare exchanges can be allowed to operate. Of course Obamacare is a success. Everybody's buying their health insurance from Obamacare. Really, why? Well, because all the other non-Obamacare insurance companies were shut down. See, it's a huge success. Now, one of the side effects of Obamacare, because of those sky-high deductibles, people who are on those Obamacare health insurance policies are not going for their regular checkups anymore. They're not going to the doctors for minor ailments and annoyances. They're trying to cure them over the counter, or they're just learning to live with it because they can't afford it. And now, of course, the doctors and hospitals are complaining that Obamacare has actually reduced the patients coming through the door. They're not making the money they thought they were going to be making. It was an absolute brain-dead program. It has utterly failed in its overt purpose of making health care affordable to all Americans, and it's failed in its covert purpose of enriching the health insurance companies, with the U.S. government getting a piece of that action through taxes. It's a failure from beginning to end, from top to bottom. A lot of people who have cable TV, we're one of them, are noticing cable TV prices are going up a lot. And it's going up out of pace with the rate of inflation, and it's done so for every one of the past 20 years. Why? Well, because you're dependent on that wire. Now that over-the-air broadcasting is all but gone, you're dependent on that cable. And once you're dependent, and these are all monopolies, there's no competition allowed in any of these cable TV markets. It's just going on up. And what do you get for all that money? Endless reruns of the same thing all over again. I can't tell you how many times the Bourne tedium is the only thing on TV. It really is out of control. There's no choice left out there. There's no variety left out there. It's just a few things being provided to you at huge markup and cost to enrich the corporations. And if you complain about it, well, you're just being unpatriotic. You're being an opponent to capitalism if you don't like the way you're being treated. Now, okay, we're going to go ahead and grab a phone call. We're going to open up the phone lines again here. Bruce in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Pleased to be able to talk to you. I'm a former radio news director, and I happened upon a story in 1980 that I was so shocked by. I never said a thing, and I've only talked about this to other people about 5 times, and I'm opening up today to talk about it on national radio.
Okay.
I can partially verify the story that there was a child sex slavery ring operating in 1980 in and around Grand Rapids, Michigan. I was the news director of a very popular FM radio station there at the time, and I was tipped to the story. What pushed me back from going forward with it, Mike, was because of what the kid told my source was the person protecting it was Gerald R. Ford. In 1995, about 15 years after
before we go to 1995. The 1980s were the decade of the Franklin scandal, which involved Boys Town, Reagan, Bush, and a lot of that stuff going on. I understand it's being fanned up again today, and I'm not saying that all of this stuff didn't happen. My concern is it's being used to try and lure the media and the American people away from the really significant scandals coming out of the email reopened investigation and WikiLeaks, because those affect our lives directly, not what was happening back in 1980. Thank you very much for the phone call, Bruce. We're going to have to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to grab a few more phone calls. Dan in Washington State, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, thanks for taking the call. Two things, the New York Times, but mostly cancel my cable. I just want to encourage everyone to cancel their cable. I get like 25 channels local, with just the antenna, and with the new digital signal, my local channels come in pretty good. And then I bought a Roku, and with that Roku, you can get tons of free stuff, movies and stuff, without having to contribute to the corrupt media, because I decided as a moral, once they put Rachel Maddow on there, I decided I couldn't deal with it anymore, the cable system at all.
Well, when they put in digital transmission here in Hawaii, unless you're living in downtown Honolulu, you can't get a good signal, because I tried going with that. I had this little tiny TV that I actually bought to use on the set for Lost, because all of those cameras are transmitting the viewfinder, so we can all see what the camera operator is seeing. It's a digital receiver, but if I'm anywhere outside Honolulu itself, it just doesn't work. In terms of cable, there's certainly some good stuff on cable outside of the news. And in my case, I'm getting my internet feed over the cable, so it's not like I can yank that wire. But I do think it's time that competition came on back in, where if you are living in an area, that you should have your choice of several cable providers in order to get the best service at the best price, because that's what competition is supposed to be about, serving the community and the people. Monopolies serve fascism and industry. Anything else, Dan?
No, I agree with you totally. And just as far as the New York Times, I troll those guys on Twitter, and I realized, they're all they are is they're the trolls. They troll the American people constantly. And if you follow them on Twitter, you'll see every article is just biased propaganda against people like us.
Well, that's why I don't follow them on Twitter. In fact, the last time the New York Times wrote an article on me, it was a complete fabrication. They were trying to say that I was convinced there was an alien civilization on Mars and it was being covered up by NASA and everything. Dan, I'm going to let you go. Switch over real quick to Jeff in Texas. Jeff, what's on your mind? Jeff, are you there?
Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. We're almost to the top of the hour.
Here.
Yes.
Yeah, you should keep your cable just to be able to watch Westworld. What a great show.
It absolutely is. I love it. I'm hooked. I'm a fan. And I'm saving all the episodes on the DVR. At the end of the season, I certainly intend to get the Blu-ray set.
Right. I feel like we're all robots living in Westworld. Maybe Trump can lead us to the center of the maze.
Very, very well. I mean, the metaphors are definitely there. And I think that's why it's going to be a huge success like the Matrix franchise was. And it is a very well-produced show. So anyway, Jeff, got to let you go. There's the music. We'll be back with another phone call after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're going to go to John in Barbados. John, aloha. Welcome back to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Yes. I want to say I'm suffering a lot from what is commonly called corruption fatigue in this election.
You're going to have to get behind me on that one.
Well, I mean, the thing is, Michael, it's destroying America's reputation abroad. Nobody believes
Do we
what's
have
coming
one?
out of this. Oh, well, yes, and how it's in the pits.
Yes, it is.
And a lot of what were not exactly allies, but at least not unfriendly to America, now are becoming unfriendly to America. They're not taking anything from the U.S. And this nonsense about America's, huge military, yes, it's huge, but is it efficient? Is it actually fit for purpose? The Gerald Ford, the F-35, the F-22, and the Littoral warships say it isn't. And people are falling away, and they're not afraid now to stand up against the American military because they know it's not that good.
No, we've seen it with all these failed campaigns. I mean, the U.S. is still stuck in Afghanistan. It's still stuck in Iraq. They can't get any traction. Our weapons are overpriced, not very good. Plus, coupling with the fact that the ordinary rank-and-file military know that these are unjust, immoral wars, they're not going to go on out there and push it to the limit. Why risk life and limb over, making somebody, some corporate executive a little bit more in his bonus this next year?
Well, I think, just look at the TTP and the TTIP and CETA and all these others, how they're failing. This is an American policy to push these things, and they're just falling apart.
Well, this was an effort to impose by treaty the economic model of Bretton Woods on the rest of the world. And most of these other countries are already saying, no, we're not going to do it. Obama's out there saying that TPP may be passed by Congress after the election and before Obama leaves office so he can sign it into law. But it doesn't really amount to anything if nobody else is going to go along with this.
Well, this is the falling down of the influence and what have you of the U.S. administration.
We're an empire in decline. There's no question about that.
I mean, this election has really brought to the fore overseas, not so much maybe in the U.S., but overseas. People can see the corruption on display, on clear display. But it doesn't matter which candidate you look at.
Well, the whole system is messed up, and it goes to the heart of the issue that our election system is the most dishonest among Western democracies, with the sole exception of Panama. Panama actually has an even more crooked election system than the United States, if you can even conceive of that. And you have all these other countries around the world who have very, very simple mechanisms like a little thumb pad, and you put this colored dot on your thumb. It proves you voted, so you can't vote again. Our country won't even do that. And now we have this lawsuit being filed down in Broward where the election officials were literally opening up the absentee ballots and throwing away the Republican-leaning ballots. I mean, it's almost like they don't want to even try and hide it. Their attitude seems to be, we're going to steal this, you're just going to go along with it like the polite little American slave that you are, and that'll be the end of it.
Well, your idea of a paper ballot system is reasonable, but that similar system is used in the UK. But we still get dead people voting. We still get all sorts of shenanigans going on. The only thing is, to make this difference is actually the die on the thumb. That's the way to stop it. You can't get double voting and
that's for the people who show up to vote. Where most of the fraud is taking place is in the absentee ballots, because that's where most of the illegals are voting. That's where most of the multiple votes are happening. Apparently there's a big stink. I guess it's in Pennsylvania, where the police have raided the Democratic one of the Democratic headquarters up there because they were manufacturing fraudulent voter registrations to give to illegal immigrants and to people who were going to vote for multiple times. I mean, it's just wide out there in the open. And I agree with Donald Trump. If it looks like the election is stolen from him next week, he should contest. And this idea coming from Hillary's campaign that you're damaging democracy by questioning the accuracy of an election. No, it's the people who are rigging the elections that are destroying the democracy.
Well, an example of what you call absentee ballots, we call it postal balloting.
Yes.
Was the number of people they were expecting in one district 4 boxes of ballot papers. 18 turned up. This is absolute nonsense. That's how they get away with it. That's how the Scottish referendum was stolen.
Yes.
That's how they tried to steal the Brexit vote, by the absentee or postal ballots.
It is a rather ridiculous situation, and my system is based on people actually showing up at the polling places to vote, and we're going to have to work out some details on this idea of people who cannot actually physically show up and vote, but there has to be a mechanism to say you're really disabled or you're really unable to go there, and we're going to send somebody out to verify that you are a real human being and not just somebody sitting at a campaign headquarters manufacturing fictitious voters. We've had that in the U.S. many times, where the number of votes turned in for a town will actually be larger than the number of people living in that town. And yet everybody says, well, nothing we can do about it. We just have to accept the numbers. It's like that judge in San Diego. He was forced to admit the election had serious deficiencies, and then he said there's no legal remedy, which is exactly what the Supreme Court said in 2000. When there was all the fraud going on about this, the dangling chads, and which sounds like a gay porn star, and the Supreme Court said we're just going to declare Bush to be the president, and there's no other remedy, and nobody can use this decision as a precedent at any time in the future. We're going to take a second here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just rejoining the network. We're taking phone calls. We're talking about the absolutely deplorable state of elections in the United States of America, and it is deplorable by design. There are no safeguards, not even the little ink stain on the thumb to keep people from voting multiple times. Don't even do that in this country. This system is designed to allow elections to be stolen by whoever's got the most money.
Well, in the UK, they try to get around this problem in a small way by issuing cards from the electoral roll. They send them out to each household, and they have one name on your name or your wife's name. All those who are allowed to vote. You're supposed to show these cards when you go into the voting booths, but unfortunately that's not enforced, so that people who don't have the cards can vote anyway.
Well, see, that's the real problem. You can have all the laws in the world to try and guarantee the honesty of the election, but if the election workers are being told, don't check, don't do anything, it's sabotage right there. And the whole point of the system that I described was to basically make the individual election at the precinct as simple and honest as possible, and then make it openly transparent where everybody is following their numbers all the way up to the national totals in order to avoid the games that we see in these tabulation centers and fractional counting of votes.
Well, I think these machines, like the teller machines in the bank, you could actually vote there, and we know that these teller machines had better be really honest.
They're really honest with the money,
anyway.
but they could be programmed to be dishonest with the election. I don't think we should have any kind of electronic voting. I don't think we should have electronic voting machines. I don't think we should have online internet voting unless somebody can actually come up with a system that cannot be hacked. And we know the government's got the best hackers in the world working over there at the NSA. So we need to go back to something that is simple, elegant, transparent, and works. And, better that we have a few legal voters who can't get to the election place and vote than we open up the election to millions of illegal immigrants, convicted felons, and refugees, multiple voting, and, of course, the walking dead.
Well, I tend to disagree with you about the best people hacking in government, the NSA, because I think some of these 15, 16-year-olds who've been living, breathing, eating, and smoking computers since they were 3 years old can beat the pants off them.
You may be right. I was able to write encryption systems they couldn't break. So you may be right on that. I may be holding up the NSA for more esteem than they deserve.
Anyway, thanks a lot, Michael, for having me on.
All right, thanks an awful lot for the phone call, and it's going to be a circus next week. We're going to go to Mary in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I just wanted to say, in response to the guy that was just calling from Barbados.
Yes.
I feel like, especially I noticed since Obama got in office the past 8 years, it was probably happening before this, they've been busy dismantling our country on purpose, for heaven's sake. So, and he cut back on the military. I remember when they first had those riots, which they sent agitators to, when that kid was shot in the street, remember?
Yes, I remember.
3 years ago? Okay. So I remember one of these elite people getting on TV and saying, and that was probably the last time I watched TV, saying, "Oh, maybe we need to call in the United Nations troops." That was what they want to do. And there's George Soros. I mean, he's contributing. They want to dismantle the United States. They're doing it on purpose, for heaven's sakes.
Well, the reason they're talking about the United Nations coming on in is despite the numbers they got on the combat arms survey, the reality is most American military are not going to fire on their fellow citizens. And so they need troops to come into this country who have no sympathy for the American people. Maybe that's one of the reasons for all these refugees coming into Europe and the United States who are young men of military age. Maybe that's somebody's clandestine invasion army. But the reality is that your rank-and-file American military are more than likely going to stand with the American people and not obey orders to do gun confiscation and mowing down their fellow citizens.
That's true, but they're also militarizing our police in a lot of places. I mean, not in the little town I live in, thank goodness, but they had tanks and whatnot. They were pointing guns at people, live guns, in that town. What was it, Ferguson? And I'm just saying they are anxious to put some of this stuff into operation. They're trying to dismantle and make us ineffective. They don't allow guns on military bases. They are trying to make us dysfunctional on purpose.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And they have us overextended. They have us overextended in all these little places that we shouldn't be.
Well, I think you're confusing issues. We're overextended in all these places that we shouldn't be because...
I mean, we shouldn't be tearing apart Syria and whatnot, stuff like that.
I'm in agreement with that. And the reason it's turned into a quagmire, excuse me, boy, it's taken me a long time to get rid of this coal. The reason it's turned into a quagmire is because the original plan was we're going to go into Afghanistan, overthrow the government, put in a puppet ruler, everything will be fine. Then we can go back into Iraq, overthrow that government, put in a puppet ruler, everything will be fine. Then we can go into Yemen, overthrow, and so forth and so on. The problem is that every one of these nations the U.S. has gone into, the population has not been willing to sit back and accept foreign puppet rule because they see how their quality of life goes into an immediate decline. They see how everything that they have built in their country, generation after generation, is now being siphoned off and sold somewhere else in the world. Their countries are being strip mined before their very eyes. And that's, the U.S. is overextended because of a lack of foresight and planning and this belief they seem to have that human nature, like science, can be subordinated to political agenda. And it's never worked out. This goes all the way back to that nonsense with Margaret Mead and coming of age in Samoa, on which this entire this entire liberal establishment belief that controlling the environment will control the mind, and if you control the environment enough, you will control the human brain. It has never worked. It will not work. It cannot work. It's a big, giant hoax, and the entire liberal establishment is founded on it.
Until you came up with that, I never read her book. I was pretty young then, but I used to like to watch her on Johnny Carson, So I guess I was never aware that she was had an agenda. So
no, she went down there to try and prove this idea that humans are born with totally blank minds, and everything that we are is a result of our environment, nature versus nurture. And, of course, the reality is it's a combination of qualities that we're born with and our life experiences makes us all unique individuals. But the liberals cling to this idea that if they control what toys children play with and what clothes they wear and what colors they're exposed to, that they can get little girls to act like little boys and little boys to act like little girls, and it simply doesn't work out. No matter how gender neutral you make the schools and playrooms, the little girls are going to act like little girls and the little boys are going to act like little boys.
I know, and can I say another thing? I know, I took some psychology, and at one time I thought I wanted to go into psychology, so I took a lot, but I remember that nature versus nurture, and looking up some research studies, they actually did research studies. I guess these were kids that in orphanages or something. They on purpose did not give them any human interaction. They just changed, did the necessities, gave a bottle, whatever, but no smiling, no talking to them. All of the kids died.
Imagine my shock.
Yeah, it's horrible. It's horrible what experiments they have done. And my daughter used to think that, they could raise a kid gender-free, and then she had her son. Her son's a terror. And she realized you can't just do that. I mean, there's a big difference. I mean, her daughters are terrorists too, but it's a different kind of energy.
It's a different kind of terror, yeah. I've got some grandnieces and nephews who are sort of reinforcing that whole idea. But again, one of the things you need to understand about anybody who presumes to be a government or a ruler or a controller is they feel they must control something to justify their position and their money. You never have a government that goes into power and say, you know something, you're all doing a really good job, we're just going to keep hands off for a while. It's never going to happen. They're going to come on in and say, oh, we're going to change how you do this, we're going to change how you do that, we're going to tell you you can't collect rain on your own property, because that's how they justify their position, not just to you, the taxpayer, but to themselves. They're in there saying, I am doing a valuable job for this society by telling people that they have to paint their mailboxes in certain colors.
Yeah, and that video you did with All Wars Are Bankers' Wars, really fantastic. So it really puts things in perspective.
Well, Zane Henry's going to be very happy to hear you say that because he put the video together. I just did the script and the narration and the voiceover. He's done a beautiful one-sheet on it, though, which is feeding my vanity.
I meant the information in it.
Okay.
But, okay, I know you were saying, I wasn't sure who did what, but I hear you talking in it, so,
yes.
Okay.
No, it all began with an article that I wrote at WhatReallyHappened.com. It's permanently listed in that little sub-menu near the top. And then I did it as a radio show, and Zane took the radio broadcast, and that became the soundtrack for the original version of All Wars Are Bankers' Wars. And now, of course, he has a new one out that's on Amazon Prime, and he's out there promoting it, and he made a really nice one-sheet that I'm going to have to get framed for my office wall.
What's his name? Yeah, the video.
Zane Henry. Zane Henry, yeah. Okay?
Fantastic.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All right, phone lines are empty. We're coming up here on a commercial break. And we'll be going back to talking about news and all the rest of it for the remainder of this program. So we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go to the phone. Steve in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, good afternoon, Mike. A caller called in and mentioned Gerald R. Ford, and he always seemed to me as though he had a pretty good reputation, and yet he was mentioning that Ford was involved in a cover-up of some kind. I didn't know whether you knew more on the subject or whether...
Oh, it's very, very, very simple. When Richard Nixon began to realize he was going to have to step down, he had to guarantee that the investigation into Watergate was going to shut down as well. Because what was at issue was the reason for the break-in to the Democratic campaign headquarters. I mean, Nixon was so far ahead in the polls. His re-election was a study in foregone conclusions. He'd successfully stolen one of the biggest landslide victories in history. So why did the GOP operatives even bother breaking in to the Watergate Hotel offices of the Democratic Party? The reason was the Democrats had gotten pictures of the three tramps that had been arrested in Dealey Plaza, Dallas, Texas, November 22nd, 1963, and the pictures were clear enough to identify two of them as E. Howard Hunt and Frank Sturgis, who were both Nixon henchmen at the time. And the Democrats were using the photos to try and get Nixon to back off of his election stealing or ultimately to blackmail Richard Nixon. So that was the reason E. Howard Hunt led the burglary into the Watergate. It was his own rear end that he was trying to save. So, I mean, E. Howard Hunt had been placed there by a news article in the Liberty Lobby. They found witnesses that he was there. And on his deathbed, he confessed to being part of the team that killed John F. Kennedy. So here's the situation. Behind that Watergate burglary was a link from Nixon and the highest levels of the government to the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Would completely destroy the crazed lone nut assassin theory, Lee Harvey Oswald in the book Depository, would all come apart, and everybody wanted that to go away. So the first thing they did is they ginned up a political scandal to allow Richard Nixon to kick out his vice president, Spiro T. Agnew. And they put in Gerald R. Ford as his vice president, so that when Nixon stepped down, Gerald R. Ford would be counted on to grant this illegal blanket pardon on anybody, declare the national nightmare over, and shut the entire investigation down. You need to remember, Gerald R. Ford served on the Warren Commission. He was part of the cover-up of the John F. Kennedy assassination right from the very beginning.
Okay, then that just kind of explains he would probably do whatever they asked him.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I always enjoy listening to your show and how you put history together so well.
Okay.
I stay tuned and listen to more.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And we're going to let you go here and switch over to Jeff in Colorado. Aloha, Jeff. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, you when you're talking about people voting, you kind of you say convicted felons like that's a bad word.
I would think so.
Supposed to work. Well, I don't know. The way the justice system is supposed to work is the sentence and fine for that convicted felon or whatever is supposed right to vote and to carry a gun. I know people that have been turned into felons for traffic stuff.
Well, let me back off here. Let me back off here a little bit. Hang on. Okay, we're not doing assessments on the individual convicted felons, but the reality is, in some states, their right to vote in elections is not reinstated immediately upon the completion of their sentence or parole. There can be a delay anywhere from 5 to 10 years, depending upon what state that you're in. That's the big issue. And if your voting rights have been suspended because you've been convicted of a felony, then you should not be allowed to vote. And everybody's always making these arguments about why felons should be allowed to vote, why illegal immigrants should be allowed to vote, why refugees should be allowed to vote, and so forth and so on. The reality is, under the law, they're not supposed to vote. And if they're voting, that's election fraud. Okay? That's the issue here. All right, Jeff, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. We'll be back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And the phone lines are empty right now. Getting on to the issue of immigration, Senator Jeff Sessions is basically out there saying that the illegal immigration issue is getting out of control. And basically is saying that the estimated number of illegal immigrants that has crossed into this country this last fiscal year, which just ended, is 817,000 illegals, who we presume are all going to be voting for Hillary Clinton over and over and over and over again. And every time we get into this issue, we will get a scream from people that, oh my goodness, you're being racist here. Anybody opposed to illegal immigration, you're being racist. Well, little clue, people. Illegal is not a race. Now, what's really interesting is the flood of illegal immigrants has actually provoked a backlash among the legal Hispanics who had been supporting Hillary Clinton, because they're realizing these 800,000 illegals who've just come into this country this last year are competition for the available jobs, resources, social services. And the legal Hispanic citizens, the ones who went through the process, are very angry that they're being sort of socially blended in with these others who just stepped across the border and thumbed their nose at authority. And remember, these illegal immigrants tend to sort of congregate around the Hispanic communities in order to blend in, unless they're being shipped to other parts of the country. And that means that these illegals who are bringing in these highly contagious diseases, the legal Hispanics are right in the front of the line as who's going to get them. Now, one of the indications that we have that Hillary's campaign is in trouble is this growing attack on the independent media, where we've literally got CNN is out there saying, don't pay attention to those fake news websites. They're all fake news. They're not real. You should pay attention to CNN because we've got the truth. Then, of course, they put out this story about how Donald Trump was telling his supporters to vote multiple times. That was a complete lie. CNN edited that, hoping nobody would notice. So that's another indicator. CNN is, for all intents and purposes, admitting that they have lost control of the minds of America. That Americans are now free. They're free thinkers. They're skeptical. That's a good thing. Story coming out of North Carolina, what a tragedy, was apparently had guests in their home and allowed his daughter to display his service weapon to the guests, and apparently it was still loaded, and somehow the girl was shot in the abdomen. And he has now been, or she has now, the police officer is a policewoman, has now been fired. Gee, you think? And it's really kind of interesting. You never hear the gun grabbers going on about how accidental shootings by the police are a reason for disarmament, because they want the police to be armed. It's just you, the law-abiding citizen, needs to be disarmed. Remember, we've got the same government that is insisting that you be disarmed is now exposed as giving military weapons to terrorist groups in Syria, along with military-style weapons to drug criminals in Mexico. They love guns. They love giving out guns. Just not to you, the American people. Because, after all, you're slaves. And slaves cannot be allowed to have weapons. That's just the way it works here. Now, as I mentioned before, we had that oil pipeline break, I think it was the Continental, a while back. And now they have, in Alabama, they've had a gas line explosion that has left several people injured, others missing. And this basically validates everything that's going on up at that Dakota pipeline. There is a legitimate concern that these pipelines coming through important lands, running across sources of drinking water, represent a real danger. Now, as you know, the police have been up there using Gestapo tactics, trying to arrest everybody on this whole pipeline project. They're claiming that they're on public land, which that is in dispute, because apparently the eminent domain by which they grabbed this land away from its rightful owner is a little bit less than clean and elegant. That's now being questioned, especially in light of all these abuses by the Bureau of Land Management. An anonymous donor has come forward this last weekend and shelled out $2.5 million to pay the bail on everyone who was arrested last Thursday at the Dakota Access Pipeline site. We don't know who did it. We know how much it cost them. But all these people are now on their way home or on their way back to the protest site. That was an amazing thing to do. Now, the police are trying to use Facebook to monitor who is going in and out of Standing Rock. And all of a sudden on Facebook, people are now checking in to Standing Rock, even though they're not involved, just to run up the numbers and confuse the police, to jam the system. It's a form of protest. Don't you use Facebook to spy on us? We'll wreck it so that it doesn't produce usable information. And that's a legitimate form of protest to do. The NSA is constantly harvesting social media. What a lousy way to get reliable raw data. Everybody lies on social media, especially if they're trying to get a hot date. But do you realize if we all started lying on our social media, you know, I got a ride in a flying saucer, I'm over here, I'm having dinner with Donald Trump's best friend here, it would render the whole system useless. Actually, considering how many terrorists the NSA have actually caught, it is useless. Like Obamacare, it's just another hideous waste of time and money being forced on us as a grand success. Now, I want to talk about this new mysterious illness that is being given a bunch of names. This comes out of strangesounds.org. And we started hearing about this a couple of years ago. And a couple of years ago, it was being called non-polio paralysis. And they were hitting that non-polio pretty hard. And what this article is talking about is that there is an illness paralyzing hundreds of children across the United States. And the symptoms are those of polio. And they're acknowledging it looks just like polio, but it can't be polio because all these kids have had the polio vaccine. Now, to set the stage for what we're going to talk about, let us go back and look at the microcephaly in Brazil. Now, starting the year after a government-mandated vaccine program for pregnant women, there was a sudden surge of babies born with small heads and severe brain reduction. Now, of course, in our present world, nobody's ever allowed to question the safety of vaccines. So the blame was laid on the Zika virus, even though Zika's been around for 75 years and never before produced microcephalic babies. And even the Brazilian scientists were saying where the microcephaly is taking place and where the mosquitoes with Zika are not lining up. And Here in the United States, they fanned the panic. Zika's coming to get you. It's going to destroy your child's brain, and the only thing they'll ever be able to do with their life is run for Congress. And they launched all these spraying programs, which made a lot of money for the spraying companies and the politicians who were invested in them. And they succeeded in decimating benign insects such as the honeybees. And today they're openly admitting Zika was never a culprit in microcephaly. Now, if you watch regular commercial TV, you are probably being inundated by all these TV commercials for various legal firms who are offering their services to the millions of people that have been permanently harmed by FDA-approved medications. And just by looking at the sheer number of these commercials, you have to understand something has gone horribly wrong with the medical industry. So, this gets us back to the polio. Now, the latest polio vaccine, when I got the polio vaccination, the little glass thing, they would actually break and scratch your skin with the cut glass of the ampule. And I still have the scar from that. Today, it's an orally administered vaccine. They just spray it in your mouth, and you've got the vaccine, and you get to go home. But that vaccine is based on what is called an attenuated pathogen. And an attenuated pathogen, they've had this problem before. And that is that attenuated pathogens can return to full potency inside the body. And this appears to have happened here. In fact, there was actually an article in a medical journal a couple of years ago asking if this had happened. And that if, in point of fact, the polio vaccine was the source of this new surge of polio. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Gloria in the swing state of Ohio. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, I want to know if you are aware of this. I was doing some research on election fraud, and I found out something interesting. I found out that in 2000 that there was a grant program that Congress appropriated that gave $2 million to 5 states, and Ohio was one of them that was given this about election. And what I'm asking, if you knew this, it says, and I'm reading, 2 states, Ohio and Wyoming, changed statutes or regulations to require federal certification, bringing the total number of states in Category 4 that require now federal certification to 12. And I read the 4 that you're supposed to read. It says, we require federal certification. Relevant state statutes or rules require that voting systems be certified by a federal agency. I want to know if you're aware of anything.
Well, I know that was the statute, and the goal was the government is trying to get the entire nation onto these electronic voting machines. The problem is the companies that are certifying them are just as crooked as the voting machine companies. And again, I advise you to hunt down Hacking Democracy, which is a wonderful documentary about how this is all done. And the reality is, like everything else, there's a law out there that's not being enforced. There's a big stink now over these George Soros electronic voting machines being sent into something like 16 critical states. None of them are certified for federal elections. And yet they're just saying, go ahead and just, touch the button. We'll tell you who your rulers are tomorrow morning.
Yes, I've read that. Then the last thing I am kind of housebound, so I applied for absentee ballot. And the other night, I filled out my absentee ballot. And for the first time ever, Ohio, we get an envelope. And on this envelope, you print your name, you put your last 4 digits of your social, you sign your name. Well, for the first time, the ballot as folded would not fit in the envelope. So my husband said his wouldn't fit either, so he just refolded it. So I called our local County Board of Elections the next day, and I told them that my ballot wouldn't fit. And the gentleman said, yes, we're having that problem this year. And I said, well, what are people doing? And he said, well, they're refolding it. And I said, how do you know that refolding it will not change the tabulation? Oh, he said it won't. And I said, sir, we have so much fraud in our election. And I said, at 67, I've learned why we're a swing state. Anybody that's got money, we can swing to win. And he said, well, why don't you call Columbus? So I called our famous Secretary of State. I talked to several people, and the First Lady did say, oh, yes, that does concern me, that you would have to refold it. So she gave me another number, and to just make it short, nobody could answer my question. They just said, oh, just fold it and put it in.
Well, that's all. That's what they're going to say at the poll workers and everything. It's always going to be. It's all working. It's all trustworthy. There's not going to be an issue. But I think we can assume that there's some kind of an automated machine to open these envelopes and pull out the ballots. And if they're not folded the way that it's expected, there could be some issues. They're going to have these people hand opening these envelopes and unfolding them. And that's where you get into this issue of, are they going to start losing ballots that lean a certain way like they just caught them doing down in Broward?
Right, and what I'm concerned about is they'll take my absentee and it'll just be destroyed. But, you know, like I said, I enjoy your program. I try to listen to you as often as I can, and I thank the radio media for informing us of the truth.
Well,
and I thank you for your hard work.
Well, thank you very much for the kind words here. And like I said, our current election system is a joke. If Donald Trump is able to overcome the election fraud next week, I think it is extremely important that every single American start pushing for an honest, accurate, verifiable election system before the next election in 2 years for House of Representatives or whatever else, the off-year election. And we definitely, we have to do that. It's the only way we're going to regain control of our country is to have an actual working democracy, and we don't have that right now.
I totally agree. And then on the lighter side, after the first presidential debate and listening to you, I called the college in New York, and I got the security, and the gentleman that answered the phone, I said, I'm an American calling from Ohio. Could you give me the name of the company that built the special podium for Mrs. Clinton? And boy, did he get rattled. And I didn't get to ask the second question. I wanted to know if it was inspected 15 minutes prior to the debate. Well, I got a hang-up on that.
I can imagine you would have. All right, well, listen, Gloria, we're going to let you go. We've got to take a break for commercials. We're going to be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And this is the last segment of our program today on this Wednesday. Boy, what a circus our country has turned into. It is a mess. A little bit of news coming out of the world of computers. Ever since Microsoft ended their free upgrade to Windows 10 offer, which was often accompanied by literally or figuratively arm-twisting people, Windows 10 market share has stalled. Nobody's actually buying it. When Microsoft is out there saying, we have this many Windows 10 systems installed, they're talking about everybody who either voluntarily or involuntarily was upgraded to Windows 10. As of today, Microsoft is no longer supplying Windows 7 or 8.1 to computer makers. You will get your Windows 10, and you will like it, no matter how pretty it is. And the reason they're pushing this is very, very hard. They are trying to transition computers from something that you buy and own, like the software, to something that you rent month to month to month to month to month to month to month. And let me respond to the control room here. And that's another sign of fascism. You're not allowed to have anything that you buy and keep and use for the rest of your life. The products are designed to fail after 5 years. Cars will dissolve after 5 years. Computer turnaround time, 5 years. And we know it's all a joke. It's all a joke. I got this Commodore VIC-20. Still works absolutely perfectly. They could, if they wanted to, build products that last so that you could buy a computer, then you could work and you could buy something else and you could improve your life and your quality of life and your standard of living. But the goal under fascism is for you to work as hard as you can, from morning till night, from birth until death, just to stay exactly where you are. And now they're doing it to computer software. And I'll tell you a reason why I don't think this is a very good way to go. It's because this will end innovation. Now, currently, when you have software like, for example, a Photoshop, and you buy a Photoshop license, it's a perpetual license, and then Adobe says, okay, well, if we want to sell more Photoshop, we got to put something else in there. We have to make it more useful. We have to give it more functionality. So they'll come along with a new version of Photoshop. And people who have the current Photoshop will look at it and they'll say, wow, that really is an improvement. I will buy that. That's how capitalism is supposed to work. But if the computer software companies are getting your money every single month anyway, why would they bother trying to improve their product? They wouldn't. And one of the biggest problems we're dealing with in computers and computer software is the indemnity that they have had ever since the early days. Back in the days of the Apple II and the Commodore and the IBM PC, the computer makers lobbied the government successfully for protection from product liability because it was a brand new industry. And they still have it. No matter what they do, you can't sue them for damages. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here. We'll be back tomorrow, Thursday, here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, you are all part of Rivero's Rangers. You're all part of the independent media. Your job is to take all this WikiLeaks information and put it out before everybody that you know. Don't get suckered in by all this Jeff Epstein nonsense. It's just another stained blue dress distraction. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.